Thanks, everyone, for joining us, the Project Censored radio show. We're very glad right now to be joined by Crystal Mello, who's a mom, a nana, and a small local business owner who's been fighting the Mountain Valley Pipeline since 2018 when she realized it was planned for her community. Crystal, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So real quick, before we get into the meat of this project, could you just tell folks what your connection is to the Mountain Valley Pipeline?
Well, it's crossing through my town. I live locally, so I'm an impacted community member. I'm not in the blast zone, but have many friends and people I love that are.
Gotcha. And so I want to start with recent news about the pipeline because work on the Mountain Valley Pipeline had been blocked by the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, even after Congress ordered the project's approval as part of the debt ceiling bill. Then the Supreme Court, in classic Supreme Court fashion, stepped in July to make a terrible decision, allowing construction to resume. And the Biden administration backed the company in calling for the Supreme Court's intervention. And the Fourth Circuit panel did not immediately rule on the Mountain Valley's pipeline motion to dismiss challenges to the project over concerns about the pipeline's impact on endangered species, erosion, and stream sedimentation. And DJ Gherkin, who's the executive director of the Southern Environmental Law Center, said after the decision, quote, "All the Supreme Court did today was weigh in on a preliminary stay. The Fourth Circuit still has the meat of the case and they can still grant final relief," end quote. So, Crystal, I wanted to talk about this because the precedent of including forced construction of a highly contested pipeline in a debt ceiling relief bill is, it's unheard of. And I'm curious how that's affected how folks are fighting on the ground against MVP, because to my knowledge, using the courts had been a stalling tactic that it had been successful up till now.
Well, currently, there are two people locked down to equipment on Four Mountain. That's what's happening as of right now. But monitoring seems to be the only way. Yeah, they've taken all our cards away, right? Like, so we all feel pretty much like we have nobody to protect us now. It is 100% us protecting us. That's what we're rallying folks for, is just to come monitoring the work. We know back in 2018, 2019, when they were actively working, they occurred well over 500 violations, but 300 during the time I'm talking, they've been violated a lot. So we know that's going to happen again because nothing's changed from the last time they were working, except this time they're here now, like, you can't touch us attitude, it, it seems so much harsh this time because we kind of, that hope's been taken away that, we can stop this. But folks are geared up. More people than ever are like wanting to come down, trying to learn how to monitor construction, water crossings. So all that feels really good. Apparently, to come down and do lockdowns. There's been multiple on-site people just walking on site and stopping work for hours. I think that's happened every day this week. But with that, we know comes that police presence and all the other things. So that's the downfall of that part.
And so far, I mean, it's only been going on for a short time so far, but I'm curious, how are people being treated in terms of, like, we saw in Atlanta, people were being charged with terrorism for trying to protect trees. Are y'all seeing any kind of similar reaction so far?
Not, this is the first lockdown today that has taken place in a couple of years. So I guess we'll see what happens. If I'm sure when they get extracted, we'll find out what the charges will be. So I can't say, but that is a fear of mine because I have seen how they've, the stuff going on in Atlanta is crazy, and it feels a lot like what's happening here. The people in Atlanta do not want that, and it's happening anyway. And such great organizing going on down there. I know there's a whole bunch of people went in to get signatures, I think by today. So I hope they feel that solidarity And because I know we're feeling it a bit here with people reaching out, like, what can we do? What can we do? And that's a good feeling. And it keeps me wanting to fight also, is knowing other people are going to be behind us. But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't
absolutely.
know. A few years ago, though, to West Virginia, where 200 miles of this pipeline goes through, they do have a critical infrastructure law. It hasn't been used yet, but two folks that locked down did get like a preliminary charges or whatever of threats of terrorism or something for locking down. The charges never went through. Maybe the grand jury didn't, whoever meets to decide if that's a thing, didn't decide that was a thing. But that's you look at what happened on January 6th, and then you're like calling these people terrorists, but these guys, like, we know the system's unjust all the way around. And more people with this pipeline, I do believe, are realizing that because now they're seeing it from another angle where maybe they've lived in a place of privilege or not having to have many interactions with the police. They are having that now and just realizing you're right here with us, friends. They're gonna they're learning also, and that's sad to see.
Yeah, it is. And I'm curious because you had mentioned, violations that had happened during construction. And I feel like, in corporate media, people will sometimes report that, oh, this pipeline leaked or this pipeline exploded, but no one ever on corporate media talks about the destruction that happens during construction. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like how incredibly destructive just the construction of a pipeline can be, and some examples of what we've already seen with the Valley Pipeline, even though it's not finished.
Well, there's people now without water because of the pipeline that have to cart water in. There's people who have lost farms because the way our terrain is, it's karst. We have a lot of caves, so we have a lot of springs. I have a well. A lot of people have well water versus like we don't have city water or municipal water. And so when they do this land moving, it the water's still going to go. It's just going to go somewhere else, and it's going to come out somewhere else. And you can't replace that. So yeah, there's people who have lost livestock or have had to sell their livestock because they no longer had this like active well or spring that would fill up the water supply for the animals. And Maury Johnson in West Virginia ended up just cutting his water off last August, I think he said, just because of the sediment from the well and the filters and just where they've damaged his property. So yeah, the sediment into the rivers and streams and creeks, we have them everywhere. The Roanoke log perch, is part of that endangered species, and that's in my area. The candy darters a little bit further towards West Virginia, but just impacts like that. There's coyotes right now. One neighbor, a bobcat was in their yard, but where they started this construction, the bears are running out of the woods, the coyotes. So that has an impact on like, people with chicken. Everybody around here has chickens. I have a dozen of eggs that someone gave me the other day because everybody gives everybody eggs. And so just things like that. Housing. People can't find places to rent or to park their campers right now because they're filled with pipeliners. So things like that. And it's none of this is local jobs. They spew that local job business. And it's not, they were cleaning the porta potties a couple weeks ago and it was an out of town truck. And I know there's a sanitation place up the road. And I'm like, we can't even get people to clean. Like we have to, but the local jobs are waitresses probably making better tips, for the time being, maybe hotel rooms staying full during the winter. But somebody who I know let me know that there's some pipeliners at a hotel who came in drunk not long ago and was harassing the girl at the front desk, a very young girl. So there's all that. And the media says like it's 90 some percent done, and that's such a huge lie. It's like 56 or 8% to full restoration per their own words to FERC filings that they have to do. And another one after the Supreme Court had their ruling, the big headline was Supreme Court rules in favor of Mountain Valley Pipeline for its last 3.5 miles left. And it's like, do y'all research before you just say the things? Like, and these are like national news, places. So everybody, of course, is like, it's only 3 more miles, Crystal. What are you doing? And it's like, it's not 3 more miles. So all those mistruths, I spend a lot of time having to talk about how they're not true. And then when we could be talking about other things.
Yeah, and of course that's a very convenient tactic that the media has to make it sound like, oh, why are you making such a big deal? It's already done. They did that with the Bayou Bridge pipeline down in Louisiana. And I think like with regards to that, I want to let folks know, first of all, FERC, that stands for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and that's the governing body that basically is supposed to look at pipelines and say that's a good idea, that's a bad idea, but they really just rubber stamp all of them. But I want to mention, because the Mountain Valley Pipeline project has been going on for really quite some time. It was first proposed in 2014, and they initially said it'd be done in 2018, but that obviously didn't happen. But in 2018, however, the company announced a proposed extension to the 303-mile pipeline, which would extend from Pittsylvania County, Virginia, into North Carolina's Rockingham and Alamance counties, and would require a massive polluting compressor station in a predominantly Black community near Chatham, Virginia. So, Crystal, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, like, you're saying that it's not at all 90% done. Like, what are we looking at in terms of the original plan of the 303 miles, and then the Southgate extension? Like, what parts are even close to done, or what's the status there on the ground?
Well, I just heard today, which I'll go down there as soon as, well, in just a little bit, that they're digging in a spot in my town that they had to abandon in 2018 because they couldn't get the water to stop. It just like, and they have to, that's their bore site under one road for people to get in and out of this community. That road leads to where we had the yellowfin tree sits for 932 days. So it'll bore under that road, two sets of train tracks, 460, which is like a 4-lane route, and then the Roanoke River. So that's where they're digging at today. They have the steepest terrain left, hundreds of water bodies left to bore. It's going to be ugly. They have the hardest parts left to do. And the Southgate extension, people made, so there's like the Citizens Air Board that denied that permit. So then that Citizens Air Board was disbanded. It was a year ago this July. I think this July 1st made it a year, but it was right after, I think that ruling happened in December, maybe somewhere in that time. I think there's been so many court dates. And that's another thing that's tricky about this whole stuff. Like, I do jail work. Like, we started a bail fund, right? So I have never been involved in any environmental work before this. Going through this process and all the different courts, and it's impossible for a single parent who has a day job to get involved. I mean, I see why people cannot show up all the time, because it's hard work and it's a dedication. And fortunate for the people in this area who do that, and have guided me and taught me things. But to read the stuff, like the FERC stuff and all that, those are things people just don't know about, that are making these huge decisions for people like me. Right around this crossing here in our town, there's like 4, 5 trailer parks. Like, they just make decisions for areas of places that are already impacted. MVP has also bought 64 acres right here in my town, which could be possibly for a compressor station. It hasn't been announced yet, but that's a real fear that we're going to be looking at. People are steadily looking at the docket for whatever permit they have to get for that. It's grateful for that. But again, those are things people, like everyday people like me, they don't know to be looking. They don't know that they bought that 64 acres. They don't know where, like, there's no, a friend said it's not like they have a red ribbon cutting, and they make it so everybody really knows about what's going on. They do all this stuff behind closed doors, And you have people in town here who are like, this is for the good. We need this. And it's like, do you even know, like, it's petroleum? I'm like, sir, it is not petroleum that's coming through. So just the misinformation, again, makes it hard.
So is
A whole
any
bunch,
part of Southgate constructed yet?
no. And they pulled back their whatever they needed to be able to do the eminent domain, but they with prejudice, so I guess they can still go forward and do it. But I think the governor, they just had a big FERC comment party, had like, I don't know, like maybe 40,000, close to 40,000 comments and petitions signed. Their governor is against it, so that's helpful. I'm hoping they won't have to deal with this. I'm hoping that this is drove them. This project is double the 3 original billion dollars it was. It's up to like $6.7 billion now. So I'm just hoping people won't. They'll just be like, we're not. I don't know, but I'm hoping they're not going to push forward on that.
So kind of wrapping up here, I'm curious that I mean, you said that today there are a couple folks locked down, and we're talking about the diversity of tactics. What are folks on the ground asking for others to do, or how can others get involved even if they can't be there on the front lines? Like how can we show up in those ways, like that kind of solidarity that you mentioned at the beginning?
Well, the folks doing the action on the ground are Appalachians Against Pipelines, and so they have a good social media presence. Speaking from Power, there's power.org, POWHR, Protect Our Water Heritage Rights. That website stays pretty updated. We're having a gathering in Sweet Springs, West Virginia at the end of the month to have some training classes on, and it's free on camping, food, music, and some trainings on different ways to get involved. And there's many ways. There's definitely a diversity of tactics of different ways to get involved. So yeah, I would check out power.org. We've
Okay.
been doing a thing monthly, like a little Zoom thing. We Protect Us, and that we've had people from the Pipeline Safety Trust, locals, a lawyer who just kind of give updates. And then during that call, there's usually ways to get involved, ways to tap in. With the Appalachian Voices, you can also probably get this on the Power page, but we're going to have a PHMSA comment party next week where sending messages into PHMSA, who's oversees these pipelines. We had a pipeline explode up 81 last week. Well, 2.5 weeks ago. Everything seems like just last week. It was a much smaller pipeline. So that's another problem is the pipes. They've been sitting out for a ridiculous amount of time and through all the elements. Per their own people who did the coding, 3M suggested that they not be out longer than 6 months. It's been 5 years. So what they've done now is just painted the top 1/3 of the pipe because I guess only 1/3 is the part that gets the elements. It's crazy. This pipeline's so unsafe. The pictures I have of the coating buckling, the inside's rusted. There's raccoons living in this pipeline in some places. This is a dangerous project, and I feel there should be red alarms going off. This is not safe at all, and it's nothing that people living in trees or locking down their equipment has caused because they like to use that. If y'all would just get out of the way, we could do the job. They're doing a horrible job. And I always say we hold people at fast food restaurants more accountable for napkins and straws than we're holding a company that's placing a bomb in some of the steepest mountains in this region and the most top tier drinking water. We have to protect Appalachia. This place is so green and just the ecosystem here. Things are burning everywhere. The oceans are sinking. We have to protect this area because this, in my heart, I feel like this is where people are going to come in the future when all hell goes out west and along the coast. And I hate to be an alarmist like that, never have been, but that's a reality. Those are facts. These things are happening. There's people without water out west right now. So that makes it even more important to protect this area. The folks suffering in the Gulf, horrible. They don't need any more LNG export facilities. This has to stop here by any means necessary.